Hey, we made it to chapter 6. So let's keep on going with the story because I'm getting really interested and I don't want to stop. So here we are, chapter 6. Although there were other ways he could have used to communicate, Dr. John Dee preferred this century's method of choice, the cell phone. Settling back into the cool leather area of the limousine, he flipped open the phone, pointed it to where Pernell Flamel was slumped unconscious between two dripping golems, and took a quick picture. Madame Pernell Flamel, he is prisoner. Now, that was certainly something for the photo album. Dee keyed in a number and hit send. Then he tilted his head, looking at the graceful woman across from him. Capturing Purnell had been an extraordinary stroke of good fortune, but he knew he'd only managed it because he'd used up so much energy destroying his golem. He stroked his small, triangular beard. He was going to have to make more golems soon. He looked at the two opposite in the brief time they had been outside in the early afternoon sun. They had started to crack and melt. The big one on Purnell's left was dripping black river mud across the leather seat. Perhaps he would choose something other than golems next time. The brutish creatures worked fine in damper climates, but were especially unsuited to a West Coast summer. He wondered if he still had the recipe to create a ghoul. It was Purnell who presented him with a problem, however, a serious problem. He simply wasn't sure how powerful she was. Dee had always been rather in awe of the tall, elegant Frenchwoman. When he'd first apprenticed himself to Nicolas Flamel, the alchemist, he'd made the mistake of underestimating her. He'd quickly found that Pernell Flamel was at least as powerful as her husband. In fact, there were some areas in which she was even more powerful. Those traits that made Flamel such a brilliant alchemist, his attention to detail, his knowledge of ancient languages, his infinite patience, made him a poor sorcerer and a terrible necromancer. He simply lacked the imaginative spark of pure visualization that was needed for the work. Purnell, on the other hand, was one of the most powerful sorcerers he had ever encountered. Dee pulled off one of his gray leather gloves and dropped it onto the seat behind him. Leaning toward Purnell, he dipped his finger in the puddle of mud dripping from one of the golems and traced a curling symbol on the back of the woman's left hand. Then he painted a mirror image of the symbol on her right hand. He dipped his hand in the sticky black mud again and was inscribing 3 wavy lines on her forehead when she suddenly opened her bright green eyes. She abruptly sat back in the seat. Madame Purnell, I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is to see you again. Perry opened her mouth to speak, but no words would form. She tried to move, but not only were the golems gripping her arms tightly, her muscles refused to obey. You must excuse me, but I've taken the liberty of placing you under a warding spell. A simple spell, but it will suffice until I can organize something more permanent. Dee smiled, but there was nothing humorous in his expression. His cell phone trilled, playing the theme from the X-Files, and he flipped open. Excuse me, he said to Purnell. You got the photo? Dee asked. Yes, I thought that would amuse you. The legendary Purnell Flamel in our hands. Oh, I'm quite sure Nicholas will come after, and we'll be ready. This time he will not escape. Purnell could clearly hear the crackle of laughter on the other end. Yes, of course. Dee reached into his inside pocket and took out the copper-bound book. We have the codex. Finally. He began to turn through the thick, rough-edged pages as he spoke. His voice fell, and it was unclear whether he was talking to the caller or to himself. 10,000 years of arcane knowledge in one place. Then his voice trailed away. The phone dropped from his hand and bounced across the car. At the back of the book, 2 pages were missing, roughly torn out. Dee closed his eyes and quickly licked his lips with a quick, flickering movement of his tiny tongue. The boy, he rasped. The boy, when I pulled it from his hand. He opened his eyes and began to scan the preceding pages carefully. Maybe they're not important, he murmured, lips moving as he followed the shifted, moving words. He concentrated on the bright, illuminating letters at the top of every page, which gave a clue to what followed. Then he stopped abruptly, clutching the book in trembling fingers. When he raised his head, his eyes were blazing. I'm missing the final summoning, he howled. Yellow sparks danced around his head, and the rear window behind him had bloomed a spiderweb of white cracks. Tendrils of yellow-white powder dripped from his teeth like saliva. Go back, he roared to the driver. Go back now. No, stop. Cancel that order. Flamel's no fool. They'll be long gone. He snatched the phone off the floor and, avoiding Purnell's eyes, took a moment to compose himself. He drew in a deep, shuddering breath and visibly calmed himself, then dialed. We have a slight problem, he said crisply into the phone, voice calm and emotional. We seem to be missing a couple pages from the back of the book. Nothing important, I'm sure. Perhaps you would do me a courtesy, he said very casually. You might convey to the Morrigan that I'm in need of her services. Dee noticed that Purnell's eyes had widened in shock at the mention of that name. He grinned in delight. Tell her, ooh, tell her I need her special talents and particular skills. Then he snapped the phone shut and looked over at Flamel. It would have been so much easier if they'd just given me the codex. Now the Morgan is coming, and you know what that means.